the basic question that we share: can we develop at all an ontology for modeling social life, and more specifically, an aspect of that which is legal history or legal facts? The wording is chosen. You will see what I mean during this talk, and I'm very happy and proud of being here in this context to present this work. And I will start with setting the stage. Why should we do something like this? And of course, as you mentioned, I am at first place a researcher in history of science, and the church history in early years. And I would like to say shortly, model scientific spaces and see how they function. And today we have this possibility of modeling in a new way, having new research questions, because of the digital tools on the one side, but more specifically, if we are able to create the conditions to reuse the data. And the FAIR principles, the R is the most important thing, is reusing the data. And this is very well expressed in this general vision by this white paper by the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, which, in my opinion, very points out the very questions that are relevant for us as researchers. What brings the digital turn for our disciplines, besides having nice websites with where people can look and say, oh, I have information here. Okay, but for us researcher, the point is the scaling effect. We can scale up with the information that we can treat. And of course, then we have to develop new research practices and teach them. So it's a great opportunity also for innovating our disciplines. And this is conceptualized by this white paper around three changes, in ways of conceiving this change. The first one is the one that we practice generally up to now, at least in the digital humanities. We bring our traditional way of working on a digital, in a digital form, on a digital support platform. More interesting is this enabling change. If we have a lot of data, we can address new research questions. We can change the way we produce also science in our disciplines. Especially in history, you know, you cannot go outside and repeat the experience like in physics. Yes, in physics, you can do 1,000 times the same experience. In history, you cannot. But if you have a lot of information about the societies of the past, you will be able to ask new questions. And of course, the last change, the substitutive change, is about artificial intelligence. You can take all these new methodologies in machine learning and the rest, and use these technologies to produce new insights. And I don't know who knows what about linked open data, so I have a couple of slides about that. Sorry if it's evident for everyone. Among the different ways of publishing information in data form, there is the linked open data vision and the semantic web vision. So instead of having PDFs and so on and so forth, this vision was proposed by Tim Berners-Lee. He not only invented the web, he also invented the semantic web. And the idea is that you take your data and you publish it, linking it to other resources. You make it reusable. And the basic grammar, the framework for expressing information in this context is called RDF, Research Description Framework. And it's based on a very simple data model, which is the one of a triple, where you have subject, predicate, and object. Every person here present being on the social networks is using, probably without knowing, the ontology friend of a friend that is implemented in Facebook and all the rest of the platforms, where you have subject a friend or yourself are friend of the other one, or you like someone. So your like is stored by These platforms using this kind of technologies, or at least the data model. The second very relevant point in linked open data is that they are linked. So the very important thing to note here is that with this kind of data, we speak about things that exist in the world, be they physical things or intellectual objects. And we have different information systems. We have here GeoVistor information system, IDREF, which is the French University Authority file, Wikidata, and GND. And all these resources speak about the same thing in the world that we call a resource. And the fact of producing these relations allows you from different data sets to know that we are talking about the same object. And this is at the core of the creation of the semantic web. Because all these silos that you see there, all these data publishers with DBpedia and Wikidata at the center, they are connected through these links, expressing the fact in the sense of linked open data, that this data is about the same resources in the web. And so all these authority files allow you to refer to the same object and bring consistency into the information that is available. And of course, you are not only interested in knowing that you talk about the same person, but you are also interested in knowing what the persons did or what the objects are about and all the rest. And so this is an example of a semantic graph where you have the objects, the painters, the paintings, the statues, related by different semantic relationships. And this is the semantic part of the semantic web, that you have concepts, relationships that describe how these entities interact. For instance, you know that the School of Athens at the bottom depicts Socrates, and that Raphael created this as a notable work. Or if you see it from the perspective of the fresco, it's created by Raphael, and so on and so forth. So you have a semantic that allows you to understand the meaning of the information that you share. And of course, it's huge. In Wikidata, it's already huge. You have millions of items. Nice. But of course, who has the biggest knowledge graph at the moment, that we know at least? Google, of course, yes, with billions of entities and hundreds of billions of relationships. And today, when you make a search in Google, you use also, without knowing the knowledge graph, and in some cases, you receive also contents from this knowledge graph that are underlined there. And there is also a connection between Wikidata and the knowledge graph, and Google knowledge graph in some cases. So the big question is, why not use this for our research? Why don't we publish our own data with this kind of technologies? And why don't we create a huge knowledge graph for research in humanities and social sciences? And then you can sparkle, be this on one repository, which is impossible, or on a federated queries logic, distributed repositories, and that you can consume the good quality information produced by other research projects. This is the vision. And of course, nowadays, these kind of graphs are used a lot. I refer here to the 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗹 𝗪𝗛𝗋 hold now already a lot of years ago, where he already envisaged the question of using knowledge graph to improve what language models do. So we could do all this for improving artificial intelligence techniques, but this is not the interest that we have. What is interesting for us as researchers, in my opinion, or in my perspective, is this question of the enabling change. Can we have at our disposal enough data, a big amount of data, which is semantically clearly defined, that we can use to answer new research questions? This is the whole interest of all the work that I'm trying to do on my side and that I will present today. In the sense of this reuse of data, and as it is stated here in one of the first sentences of this first presentation of the principles, the point is infrastructure. Yes, you need infrastructure. And this is the big problem. And since 15 years now, I'm trying to create support, I don't know how to say, with scholars together in different contexts, develop research infrastructure. And I will comment this also in the end. This is the vision that we propose, that we would have a place at the top, which is called Ontology, where we share the model about the social world, which can be a big model with different facets and contexts. I will talk about this today. And then we have infrastructure platforms like GeoHistory, which are virtual research environments that allow different projects to produce data. Or you can have a lot of these distributed environments, like on the right. You can have what we call dataforhumanities.org, which is a place where we take spreadsheets, that data, convert it into RDF, and put it there so that you can reuse and query this information. And of course, we have to refer to authority files. And I published this in the context of the French National Agency for University Libraries, so IDREF. IDREF is in France with the Bibliothèque Nationale authority files, a big provider of authority files for all the university libraries. It's not like in Germany, you have just the DFK. No, BND. In France, you have two, and this is one of the two that we can use as a researcher also to produce new persons, places, and so on if needed. Okay, and for doing all this, we know, it's clear, we know a formal, accessible, shared, broadly applicable language for knowledge representation, which translated for us an ontology. This is the definition of an ontology. And of course, we need community standards and control vocabularies that are shared, which is another level of discussion. I will focus today on the ontology, intended as the terminologic part of the graph. You know, or not, in a graph, in an RDF graph, you have two parts. You have the instances, the assertions about the word. This is called the A box on the bottom. And you can express with different formalism, with this RDFS or OWL, you can express the model. And this is called the T box. And today I will speak about this. How can we create a T box that can be applied in different research projects? For this, we have ontologies. And ontologies have some elements that we have to keep in mind and for me to stress here. First, you need formal semantics, logic. This is very important for reasoning and for consistency, but in our point of view as scientists or as humanists, this is not the most important thing. The most difficult thing is the second point, is creating consensus. It's having a community, a larger community of many projects referring to the same model. Because having a conceptual model is not yet having an ontology. You have to formalize it, you have to have a community using it. And then, of course, you need also the concepts, and these must be also refined. There are ways, methodologies for refining the concepts. so that the concepts you use in the ontology, which are more abstract, correspond to the mental models of the humans, that researchers that use this concept in work. And then, of course, this is the big challenge that I will try to address today. Ontology is always referred to a domain of interest, like a scientific discipline. So can we build something that is beyond one domain of interest? And this question is the question that all research projects interested in ontology have. They begin to create a research-driven data model, which is good, but then they wonder to which ontology they should refer, which is the best one on the marketplace. And I will try to address this question, but do it from my perspective as a researcher, also in the name of all the researchers that are interested in sharing a more profound understanding of what we are doing when we produce research data. That's why I will express now some considerations about epistemology and methodological aspects in order to produce this high-level ontology that can be reused in different contexts. But first of all, we have to know, to remind ourselves that our disciplines build domains of discourse. The word is there, but we create a domain through our scientific interest. And in this domain, we create scientific objects, and we create research questions. And they are not the same in the different disciplines. And also, we develop different methods for having this empirical reference. But these methods are not the same, even in humanities or in sociology, social sciences. And in the end, we want to produce knowledge, and this knowledge will be, of course, usable and relative to the domain, but often not directly reusable in other contexts or with discussion. So what is the domain of the humanities and social sciences in general? Is it possible at all to define? I state now something, and in the discussion, you will have the opportunity to say your own opinion or, how do you say, contest this vision. So we know physical and biological sciences study the world in its materiality. We can observe the world because we have a brain, but this brain does not come from nothing. It comes from socialization. So our vision of the world is based on language and on socialization. We live in a network from our parents and all the rest. So this is us, and as humans. And we observe and study this, the blue and the red parts in humanities and social sciences. Also, we know we do not see the world as it is, but we see the world through our representations as humans. So the question is how to conceptualize this phenomenon and what you see. And for this, I propose to refer to standard concepts in the humanities and social sciences, and specifically in social psychology or sociology, the concept of social representation, as I already presented. And in philosophy, there is this notion of collective intentionality, and there is a whole bunch of literature in social philosophy about this kind of considerations, how to conceptualize from a philosophical point of view our way or as humans to consider the world. So for me, these are kind of synonyms, of course, with different approaches and the whole explanation how they function and why they are there. This is science. So it's not the domain of my discourse today. Here is just about having this basic notion that we as humans observe the world through our social representations. And this is some literature just to state that it's standard, yes. It's what I present here are standard concepts. I do not pretend to explain them, not to have a theory. It's just a fact that, take example, contemporary ones that will be relevant, especially at the end of this year when they vote in the other continent on there, the new continent. There are, in the same societies, people seeing the world totally different. So the bipartisan situations that you observe depend on the fact that in individual minds, in social context, are present different kinds of social representations. So the proper of our sciences is to try through, of course, sources and materiality and so on, to go inside the minds of the persons. So find out, for instance, what the legislator thought when he wrote down the law, as we discussed this morning, yes? What happened in the mind of the person, yes? And we have to go through this materiality. And of course, now here I am talking to you, so I'm expressing through the waves of the air and my mouth, produced by my mouth, I am expressing my mind about things. And we try to work on that inside level of individuals and societies. This will be the foundation of the ontology, as you will see. The second very relevant aspect for us in humanities, historical sciences, but more in general, is that what is given to us is just the world as such. The data is not the digital data, is our sources, the nature, what we hear when we do in sociology. We ask people what they think. This is the data. But as soon as we produce an information system, we create information, or what I call information. And this is the interesting part, to create this information and share it with other people. Then, based on this information, we interpret the world, we produce knowledge. It's very useful, but for me, it's less interesting in the sense of consuming the data for producing new knowledge. It's less interesting than information as such. So I'd like to stress the fact that the information is at the core of data reuse. The FAIR principles, in my opinion, are specifically concerned with sharing the information as a representation of the world in order to do new research. And so the problem comes now, because on the one side, it's nice to hear that we want to share factual information, but on the other side, we know that factual information depends on our side of the world, on our vision. So ontologies help us to find a way to do this. But before showing how, I would stress once again what we discussed this morning. There was a moment where we're talking about this distinction between how we conceive the objects that we observe. Yes, we are at the top, we are science. And the persons that produced the documents that we observe thought another way. So we in humanities always must distinguish between our understanding of the world and the understanding of the world of the objects that we study. And if you would like to reuse the data I produce, I should share with you the information conceived as a representation of the people of the time I study, and you can reuse it in your own vision of the things. And possibly, as we learn in our disciplines, not mix up, yes, not try to prove our own opinion using the sources. Okay, and ontologies help us doing this because first, we are taught we have to consider objects. Put them into classes, decide if a bee and humans are in the same class or not. This depends on the discipline. If we are all in the animal world, we are not plants, yes? But you are not mammals, we are mammals, these not. So, for example, things, and things become objects through the ontology. And then, how do we model the properties? The colors, the gender, the prices, they are not stable, they change in time. And then we have to model relationships. So this is the basic grammar, the basic elements in the ontology, if we conceive this as a representation, a factual representation of the world. And then we can apply our analysis, our research question on this, and produce knowledge. So what are the domains or example of domains of interest in the context of our discussion today? For instance, a border stone. What is a border stone? Well, first of all, it's a stone. It's a physical object, was there before. Then you take it from somewhere, you put it so that it stays. You can carve a cross, a bishop cross on it, and it becomes a border stone. So you have a conception of what a bishop is, you have a conception of territory, and so on. Then this territory today is not anymore probably a diocese, but it's a legal state territory. And this you see in the back, yes, with the new border stones. So the whole question is how to model this. Artifacts that define space. Next question. What's the difference between myself and the French king? We both have legs, speak, must eat to not starve, and so on, but he has something different than myself. And this moment of the crowning makes him to be a different person. How we model this, how in an ontology. And then the classical example, in the Dolce context, you have a car race, and of course, interpreted as very funny by the people driving, but the policeman that will find them finds this as being not legal in some countries. So this is again the interpretation of law. That's how you express this. Well, exactly this can be the foundation for expressing all these kind of phenomena. That we humans consider reality through social representations. And of course, the representation that has more humans on its side will win, yeah, unfortunately. Not necessarily the most human one. Now about the methodology. Before I started to model and work on ontologies and all the rest, other scholars in the domain of ontology engineering and semantics invented methodologies, created methodologies to build robust ontologies. And so I find it very important, very inspiring to refer to this work and try to figure out, I will not go into details now, what the basic elements are, like the essence of a class, or distinguishing between individuals, which are the criteria that are useful, or the questions of parthood and dependence of one instance of the existence of the other one. So these are basic rules for good ontology modeling that should be known to ontology engineers that work even in humanities, because they help to clarify what you're doing. Next question, how you can model the complexity of the reality we want to model with a resource-centered model? You cannot. You have just a resource, you have elements around. If he is in charge of different roles, you cannot express the data of the roles. So the strict RDF model does not fit with this if you use it this way. So Wikidata tried to address this issue with the statements model. Instead of using just properties, you have statements. But the problem is it remains fundamentally binary. For instance, you have a person, the date of birth. we know the sources, is the first part, and the place of birth, and the rest. So Wikidata has quite the same model, resource center, just with statements. And of course, you can try to put there inside dates and all the other things. But then you are not doing what is foreseen for, which is providing metadata about the quality. The only model that allows you to really speak about the complexity of the reality we study is the event-centered model, where you have the temporality as a relationship between different objects. And you can provide all the metadata to all the statements. This is the methodological issue. Then remains the question, okay, I understand I have to use ontocli. Okay, I understand it's better to have an event-centered model. Where can I find it? It remains a challenge. So what I propose to do is to work this way. First, after you have conceived your own research data model, which is the first step always, exactly know what you have as information conceptualized in your mind, according to your world, you take foundational ontologies and you inspect it. Foundational ontologies are created not to be used for data production, like 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗶 and so on, but to serve the understanding of what you are talking about, and in this way, improve interoperability between domain ontologies. This means you have different domain ontologies, and from the foundational perspective, you try to figure out if you speak about the same objects. And we learn from foundational ontologies, and in particular from 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗶, that on the one side we have objects, endurance, things whose identity, of what the identity is stable during the whole life, even if they change in some way, but we identify them as being always the same object, like stones, border stones, even the concept of king, and these kind of things. And then you have perdurance, which are what the events that happen in time, or other aspects happening in time that where the first endurance participate. For instance, the person being crowned to be a king. Then you have qualities, and qualities are inherent, like colors, to persons. And so you could wonder if being king is a quality inherent to a person. I would say no, and I will try to show you where it is, this quality. And then you have abstracts in 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗶, which are points in time, points in conventional space regions. When you know this and some other aspects, you can analyze your ontology, understand that some aspects concern endurance, for instance, text, books, stones, concepts, and other, like buying the book or becoming this role and so on, belong to perdurance or to qualities, as we will see. Then the next step, I said, avoid using foundational ontologies for producing data. So what should we use? We can try to figure out if there exist ontologies, high-level ones or core ones, generic ones that are used by different projects. And in humanities, we observe the SciDoc CRM is used for this. So we can take it. Okay, it's an event-centered model. You have here the model. It's an ISO norm with the new version last year, end of last year. It's useful. It has some basic elements that are very interesting, also for humanities, like physical things, distinction like physical things, and so on. It's a good starting point with some aspects to be revised, but it's okay. But you need more, yes? You need all the social life and all what I showed, it's not covered, yes? Border stones and all these kind of things, as such, as intended in our social life, are not modeled because it's not the domain of this ontology. The domain of 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗶 is the integration of metadata of conserved objects in museums. So you need more. And for this, we propose this ontology, and I will shortly show you how it functions for the relevant things. So listening to all the users during 15 years what they need, trying to put it together with the OntoClean and the high-level analysis and so on, we came in our team to a proposal that is open to discussion because ontologies only exist if they are adopted by larger communities. So this is just a proposal that makes some sense, that fits just for one aspect of the data production. So the whole discussion about how you model sources metadata, how you model all the rest exists and is something else. So what I show is just specific to one specific aspect, is how we can conceptualize the factual information that we want to share. And of course, just one level isn't enough. You can reuse existing extensions or create new extensions. You could even imagine to have projects' own extensions, but better would be to use what we call application profiles. So that you know from your analysis on the left, what is your specific need in the sense of a content. You conceptualize your need. And then you try to figure out if these classes exist already. And you create application profiles. So the two red boxes do the same, in fact. Just on the left, it's your duty to clearly understand your domain. And on the right, you express it with some help by the community. Yes, because there is a community of persons that you also can ask, like experts. And this you can do around the infrastructure that we created for that in Lyon, and now it's more widely used, which is called Ontomy. Ontomy is the place where you discuss about conceptual models. You do not have control vocabularies, you do not have instances there, just the way you think about the world, the T-box. With different levels. If you're interested, I can give more explanations during the discussion. So now you have a methodology, you have a place where you can go and fetch the classes and properties that you're interested in. You still do not have probably the infrastructure for doing this, for producing the data. This next question, but not this talk, just mentioned in the end, but it's a big question, having the infrastructure. You can take media Wikibase, try to use this there, or Whisky, or GeoHistory. I will spend a word about that. But this is for another topic. Now I would like to share with you some aspects of this ecosystem, more what kind of classes we could use for modeling what you're interested in this context. It's of course also in Ontomy. So you can discover or ask us to show you where it is, how it works. And so I provide here some examples. And first, the high-level classes. So, as I said, it's an integration of 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗶 that uses the classes and properties of 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗶 as far as possible and adds those that we consider are missing. The reason is that, as we said, you have your conceptualization of your domain, and it would be an error to squeeze the information that you have or constrained into existing classes just because it's a norm, it's an isonorm. This would be wrong. You have to find in the ontology classes that fit to what you need. So if it's about knowing that this bridge had this length at that time, and then there was an event and the length changed, or if I had a red bicycle and then I decided that I prefer to have it green, and I want to put this into data, I use entity qualities, which are also time related. A temporal entity is a phenomenon that happens in time and that you can observe. And the color of my bike, you can observe that it is also in time. It's just different how you observe it. But the substance is the one of the temporal entity. It's not exactly the same as an epistemic situation. When you want, for instance, to model the economic activity of a country with all the parameters and values, you observe there also a phenomenon. In 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹, this phenomenon you would normally call a period. The problem is the problem of the essence and of the identity, because in 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹, a period has an identity that is self-defined. But in the epistemic situation, 2023, this is cut out by you. That's why it's also a temporal entity, it's also a phenomenon you can observe, but the limits are given by you. It's like a scientific experience. You define the phenomenon. So this is clean, respects or considers the difference, which is important ontologically with period, and allows you to model climate data. And for the rest, for this part that is interesting, where can we, for instance, for us, yes, this mental and social part, where can we put it? And here comes what I said, collective intentionality, social representations. So it works. We are here, of course, at the high level, abstract part of the ontology. The class intention is based on, in the name and basic concepts, what philosophers call intentionality. So you observe objects in the world through your way of thinking. So the intention is not the will to act, yes, it's how you observe things in the world. And the subject of the intention, so the person that has the quality, is a human alone. And so the intention is a quality of a single human. So the intention, the fact that I observe you and I consider that you are hearing and I have to finish my talk at time and you are more or less interested and so. So my intention is, you are the objects of my intention at this moment, yes? And all what I think is the content of my intention. And so this intention, this specific instance that I mentioned, is a quality of my mind. So we are the carriers of the intention. Next, there is a big discussion. Do we have in the world just individual intentionality, or do we have collective intentionality, and what it is? Because here we do ontology engineering, I do not decide, but I provide a way that you can also have intentional collectives. For instance, the Republicans, the MAGA Republicans, is an intentional collective. Or a scientific community, yes, because scientific communities where some principles are valid, physics, contemporary physics, or astrophysics, or particular, you call this, atomic physics, are also intentional collectives. And to get there, you have at least to have a PhD and follow some rules and so on and so forth. So they are not really groups, because I forgot to speak about this in my slides, but we can discuss this another time. Groups in 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹 are more specific. They act together. Intentional collectives are bunches of persons that share the same vision of the world. And everything is fuzzy, yes? The borders of all these classes, according to the 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹 methodology, are always fuzzy. besides physical objects, yes? So how do you model a car-race? But that's pure intention, yes? You have different views. These different views, where are they? Well, they are in the representations of the persons. There are the persons in the car, they have one instance of intentionality, and the policeman has another instance. So you have intentional states. These are qualities where, in a quite stable way, a person thinks that this is true. When you say Galilei began in, I don't know, it expressed it the first time, but we do not know when he really began in 1592, when Galilei began to think that the Earth moves. He began, we do not know when, but we know from then on, the intentional state of Galilei is about the propositional mode. It has the content, propositional object. The Earth moves, and what is the object? The Earth. In the case of the policeman, what is the content of the intention? That this is a crime, this car race. And what is the object, the intended object for the policeman in his intentional state? It's the event of the car race. So this is the way of conceptualizing intention in social philosophy, also with other words, in sociology and social sciences, that we can use here to have this foundational layer for expressing social life. What about border stones and legal objects? So we have the intentional states, as we have said. Intentional states on the left are, there's not a pointer here, yes. Well, I have the mouse here. So this is the intentional state. A subclass is connotation, which is classification, but it follows the terms of linguistics and semiology, that we denote things using names and we connote things using concepts. So the things are there, but we classify them. And it's called connotation because here we associate to a thing some concept. And in a more specific way, we can give a look to the classes in the discussion afterwards. Legal facts are a kind of official, widely adopted, legal in a very broad sense, connotations. And more specific, you have the class holding of a right and obligation, which is the king there. It's modeled, but in this case, it's a border stone, yes, because we are talking about the border stone. We define here is a border, okay, and this is legal. And holding a right means the bishop here, or the diocese, holds the right on this land to have the jurisdiction. So it's a collective belief until there is no revolution, yes, because when the revolution comes, then it's finished, that the church in some ways keeps jurisdiction on this territory. And of course, the territory is a social object that is defined, agreeing that the border is here. The content of this belief is what in 𝗟𝗏 is called right. Because if you know the 𝗟𝗏 class right, it is a propositional object, which means an intended content that says, for instance, this house is mine. If I say this house is mine, it is a right. And a legal object in 𝗟𝗏 is an object submitted to a right. But the right in 𝗟𝗏 is not conceived as an event, nor as a state. It's conceived as a proposition, just the proposition. And so, as I said, we are consistent. The content of the fact temporal of having a right, holding a right, the content is the 𝗟𝗏 right. And who is holding the right during this time, so that we can model the class with the beginning and the end? It is the actor. It is a person or a group. This shows you how it's modeled also semantic data for humanities to bring in the basic classes that we need, that you will extend yourself or with control vocabularies, enrich them with types in a way that fits as much as possible with the 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹. And also we know often holding rights is related to law, to the belief that property is legal and ownership, and that ownership is defined and so on and so forth. And customer law is also propositional object, is the collective belief that it's generally allowed to have personal ownership. If the Bolshevik revolution comes, your house is not your house anymore, because the society in which you live, take the example, yes, in the film, 𝗟𝗲𝗴𝗶 the house is not anymore his house, because the collective belief is this house is not anymore his house. So the customer law context changed, the collective belief about the law changed, and so your right disappears. And the king, of course, these are social roles. Social roles come into existence through intentional events that are also activities. When I say, this is the king, or we vote, and this is the president, these are intentional expressions where something happens in the minds and is also expressed. So it's a kind of activity, but not just the activity of producing something, because this is production, it's physical. An expression is a speech act, as philosophers say, as Searle says, the speech act. I declare you as being the owner of this. And this makes you the owner of this in the intentionality. So intentional events and intentional expressions affect intentional states. And in the case of persons, we call this, we propose to call this, we can change, if you want to change, social role embodiments. So you have the person, you have the role, which is king, act of social role defined by law or custom. And with this crowning happens an intentional expression that declares this person being king. And from this moment, this effect starts an intentional state, which is of embody this role, the role being a type, of course, a socially defined type. So, and with this, we propose this way of conceptualizing social life to you, especially the community in general, to discuss if you think it's of any use, and we can develop this together with even more domain-related extensions if needed. As a foundation of this view of having a distributed giant information graph of research data that speaks the same language. And this will be very interesting for projects like the 𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹 project that uses the CDOC-CRM, not yet, of course, the semantic data for humanities. So there are projects that also in the Max Planck Institute's context is for history of science that publish RDF. So we should go in this direction, that all these projects also use, if they need them, more classes that we can develop together. Or we can put, as I said, spreadsheets, or use, this is a project coming from a relational database. The database is still filled as a relational database, but the whole data is also converted into RDF using this methodology. Or you can use GeoHistory. GeoHistory is a virtual research environment that tries to do two things at the same time. One thing is to implement this vision. So say I take profiles from Ontomy, I have my ontology, I do not reinvent a model for each project. The project clearly defines what is the information content that the project wants to model. Then the project tries to find out, or asks the experts to tell the project which is the class or the profile that you can use for this. Okay, and then it produces RDF. There is a SPARQL endpoint where you can query the data of the project directly. So this is one side, trying to implement in this view. But the other side is very important, hiding all this from the researcher. Because the researcher, at least, yes, the researcher has to have the impression she is in their own project database, alone, with their own data, with fields. Happy with that, it works. Or you are a more advanced project, of course, you want to import existing data, do NLP on corpora and extract. This is another also possible use case. But generally speaking, the idea is trying to have a virtual research environment for researchers that is as easy as possible to use. And on the other side, realize this giant knowledge graph vision on the other side. So, my conclusions. All this effort, of course, is because I would like, as a researcher, to do this. For the moment being, I'm still trying to build the infrastructure, yes? But I hope I will have some years also to do the rest. If not me, you. So that's why it's important to build infrastructure that allows to host and manage this kind of projects. Secondly, this already exists, so we can leverage on this linking of the entities. This exists, we should use it, especially Wikidata or national authority files according to different contexts. And also, of course, this is the vision, because if you imagine that a portion of that are all our projects, and not like now cellular biology and proteins and all the rest, yes, unfortunately, not a lot of humanity projects there. This would help us to work in another way. For using this, we should try to develop together a kind of lingua franca of high-level way of agreeing on basic concepts instead of using schema.org, please. Yes, because, okay, we are still humanists, yes, not only digital. And also know that there is a context with other ontologies, so we have to map this, we have to be consistent, we want also to understand the other models. It's a dialogue, but we have a specific approach. And this is based on basic notions of social philosophy, social ontology, social psychology, sociology, and so on. So basically, it's like a minimum common denominator for this kind of aspects, and answers quite good some question at least. And with this, we can build this distributed infrastructure that we dream of. Some publications that we will find, you'll find in the slides where I try to promote this kind of approach. And these are our projects. Thank you. Join us. It will be great.